Good day, investors. Welcome. I'm Jared Bowers. Today, and in the next 2 episodes, we get to dive into one of the most foundational concepts and applications of this philosophy of everything is investing. More accurately, what we're going to dive into is a collection of parallels that ties together almost all of what we will focus on and what we are going to talk about from here. And we're going to do that across multiple episodes. 3 episodes, in fact. A deep dive already, huh? Yes. Very exciting. Because I've been teasing deeper dives, haven't I? That time has finally come. And what we are going to be diving into is the wealthy mindset versus the poor mindset. And before we dive into other investment-related content from here in future episodes, tools of portfolio management, investing practices as applied to both money and to life, to make sure that we're all working from the same page and the same basis of understanding, this focus on poor versus wealthy mindset is going to be an important thing to cover. And some, when you hear mindset, are going to be excited because you love talking about mindset. And others of you may roll your eyes a little bit because podcasting in general has a reputation of talking about mindset and focusing on mindset a lot, especially the self-help genre of podcasting, which I'm not sure if that's exactly where we're going to fall into. Probably, to be fair. Of course, finance and investing is the overarching topic. We have and will talk plenty about money. But mindset content in podcasting has a bad reputation. And there is a very clear reason why. And I don't think that it's about the focus on mindset. I think that it's about how many people talk about and apply mindset. And what we are going to do when we talk about mindset is try to solve for some of those deficiencies that give that mindset-focused content a bad name. And before we dive into wealthy mindset versus poor mindset, let me set the stage a little bit. Let me talk about some of the reasons why mindset-focused content can be problematic and not very helpful. I will get into some of the caveats and disclaimers about what we're going to be talking about, and then we will get into the meat of it. So, one reason why the mindset focus in podcasting has a bad reputation is because it just throws around words like habit, discipline, manifestation, gratitude, abundance. I'm guilty of that myself when it comes to some of those words. And often, those terms are thrown around without tying them to real-world systems or showing how they translate into real-world outcomes. It mostly is very vibes-based, very surface level, simply motivational, instead of what should also be applicable for the purpose of being transformational. When we talk about mindset, we are going to apply it to specific investment and behavioral frameworks and practices. We need to have a framework, then we need to apply it, which will determine the direction of our compounding and the magnitude and direction of the returns that we get. And that's not vibes or manifestation. That's finance. And I love finance. But again, finance that is applied to both money and to the important things beyond money. Another issue with the mindset focus in the self-improvement side of podcasting is it often is just feel-good entertainment rather than real application and instruction with substance. It is very motivational. It's inspiring. It elicits an emotional response, which can feel great and can be fun to listen to. But it kind of evaporates at the end of the episode because there's not really any meat or application. We need to be able to identify feedback loops so that we can adjust our behavior. Examples of input and output relationships that we can use. Examination and accounting of opportunity cost. Measuring, tracking, and benchmarking to determine if we are heading in the direction we want to be heading. And what I think people really want from mindset-focused content is information and instruction that they can actually apply, not just ear candy. I think they're looking for models, equations, frameworks, examples of cause and effect. application in the real world. But oftentimes, personal anecdote is all that those podcasts rise to. We encounter this in all sorts of digital media. My life was a mess, then I learned XYZ mindset, and now everything is amazing. You just need to manifest it. You just need to believe in it enough. And we know and recognize that for what it is. Mostly just feel-good fluff. And so, we are not going to over-index on manifestation. Thinking about something, believing in it, thinking the right thoughts, focusing in the right direction of the universe, hoping that it will send you what you want or what you need. That empty approach immediately loses credibility from my standpoint, and probably from yours as well. People know that that is not how the world works. We actually need to do the work. We actually need to put in the reps. We need to make the deposits that are needed to build the balances we want. And it is not about magical thinking. From an investment standpoint, and let's talk about money investing, it doesn't matter how great your mindset is and how well you may manifest wealth going forward. If you don't actually take action, solve problems, identify opportunities, and put money to work. Without those things, you're not going to get the returns because no investment was actually made. The examples that we will discuss will be connected to reality, to real-world stakes. What we want is to have real-world application that is grounded, actionable, measurable, relatable, and inspiring. And maybe it will even give some of those warm, fuzzy feelings that the mindset-focused self-help fluff can give you. And I think that's okay in appropriate doses. But there has to be a balance between the meat and potatoes and the dessert. And as we talk about wealthy versus poor mindset over the coming episodes, I want to make clear something else. Mindset is not everything, as we know, but it is a lot of it in investing, both financial investing and life investing. You get what you pay for. You get the returns that you invest toward. You grow the accounts that you make deposits into. And the precursor to most of what determines how we invest and what we invest in is the mindset that we operate from. If you show me a true picture, a real representation of someone's mindset when it comes to any area of their life, I can likely predict their future returns in that area. And it's not a special skill that I have, so can you. Because our mindset is the biggest determinant of our investing behavior, whether we make the deposit or withdraw in the first place. That is what makes this foundational, so important. That is why it overarches and interweaves everything that we're going to talk about from here. And these next few episodes may lean more philosophical than practical, more general than specific, but it does represent an important piece of the investing pie. Or puzzle. I prefer pie, now that I think about it, but I don't think that's the way the phrase goes. Anyway, another point that ties into behavior. Knowledge can only get us so far. Someone can have all the steps and tools and recipes of exceptional portfolio management memorized, and it will avail them not much if they approach life and live life with a poor mindset. And, as often is true with what we talk about, someone can know very little about the tools and recipes and investing strategies, but if someone approaches life with a wealthy mindset, they will very likely find success in most of the areas that they apply that wealthy mindset to. Mindset is crucial because it impacts our behavior much more strongly than knowledge or even opportunity does. And that is why it is a prerequisite and an enhancer of what is coming. Okay, before we dive into the 16 parallels of wealthy versus poor mindset, and don't worry, again, this will be covered in multiple episodes, I have some disclaimers to point out. First disclaimer. Each of these 16 parallels is not perfectly distinct. There is some overlap between them. If an editor, my wife, got a hold of this list of 16, she might really want to consolidate a few of them, because some of them are related. But I believe that there is enough distinction that each merits its own parallel, because they each have unique and applicable characteristics important to investing across life. Second disclaimer. These mindsets, like most things, exist on a spectrum, And we can move on that spectrum, and we do move on that spectrum between wealthy and poor in different areas of life over time. Maybe even between good weeks and bad weeks that we're having. We typically don't firmly plant ourselves on one side or the other of wealthy versus poor mindset and then never change. There are some that are on the far side, the middle, or the far opposite side on these spectrums. But we can and do move. And that should be encouraging. Third disclaimer, these mindsets between poor and wealthy are not completely determinative by themselves. There are wealthy people who embody at least some of the poor mindset traits. And there are poor people, not just talking about money, but in the areas of life that they care about, who embody some of the wealthy traits. But it is rare that someone who mostly falls on the poor side of the ledger lives what could be considered a wealthy life. Similarly, it is rare that someone who falls mostly on the wealthy side of the spectrum lives what would be considered a poor life. Next disclaimer, number 4. This goes beyond money. I think I've mentioned that. Like most things, or maybe everything that we talk about in this podcast, the application goes beyond money. Just by nature of how I've named it and described it, wealthy versus poor, it's going to sound like I'm talking primarily about money at times. And many of the points and examples do involve and will involve money. But this is a very important point. The wealthy versus poor mindset is about our approach to, and therefore outcomes in, life, not just with money. And this is important because I know people who are living very rich lives who would not be considered rich in monetary terms, at least by American standards. Probably most of the Americans that I know would still be considered pretty darn rich by world standards. But this does also apply to the people I've known and worked with and lived around in much poorer countries as well. It goes beyond money. Because those rich lives are defined by the purpose they're living for, the impact that they're having, the peace that they have, the family that they've built, much more so than how much money they have in their investment account, or what house they live in, or what cars they drive, or what their net worth is. Many people who are living very rich lives live with that wealthy mindset approach, are purposefully working jobs in fields that don't come with big paychecks. That doesn't mean that they're poor. Purpose and investing well in the things that you care about are much more important than the size of your investment account. Now, in the future, I would like to talk about how people in those fields that may not come with big paychecks can still live well monetarily. That, I do not believe, is taken off the table in most cases. But we're going to set that aside for now, because I have another disclaimer. And that is, when it comes to money, there are wealthy people that live and operate with a poor mindset. And conversely, there are broke people that operate with a wealthy mindset. Because your mindset says much more about your trajectory and your likely future outcomes than it does about your current financial position, or your current position in anything that you are investing in. Again, hard and fast, determinative relationships, perfectly positive correlations in the real world usually don't exist. That goes back to my comment about the spectrum. You are going to come up with examples of exceptions. Many of you will be the example of the outlier, of the exception. And we will talk more about this once we've covered all the mindset parallels. Now, the final disclaimer. I think that's number 6. What we are going to be talking about going forward is about awareness for the sake of improvement, not to cause feelings of shame or guilt or establish superiority or inferiority. Because I struggle with some of these same items on the poor side of the ledger myself. And I will point out some of those. And I think that we will be served well by paying attention to this list and then applying this list of wealthy versus poor mindset traits. Because these are prerequisites to the path that you want to be on and that you will be on. Yes, this goes beyond money, and it is strongly related to money as well. And the people that I work with, that I help, that I teach, they clearly want better money outcomes, but they also want better outcomes in life. Okay, with all that being said, and obviously we're going to need multiple episodes on this, if just the preamble and the disclaimers took this long, in the remaining time that we have together in this first episode, part 1 on wealthy versus poor mindset, I want to cover the first 3 on the list in detail because of how important and foundational they are. And I'll give them to you up front. And they are time horizon, abundance, and ownership. Aha! There is one of those manifestation words already. Abundance. Did I lose credibility already? Hang with me for a bit and then decide. Because these 3, time horizon, abundance, and ownership, are foundational to investing across life. Financial relationships, health, all of the above. And let's dive into each one in detail. Okay, number 1, time horizon. When it comes to time horizon, the poor mindset side is, you can probably see this coming, a short-term focus. Those with a poor mindset view time cheaply. They live for the weekend and see time as something to be spent. Very little focus on anything that goes beyond the immediate. The wealthy mindset, in contrast, and you likely already have this in mind as well, is, of course, a long-term focus. Those people view time as the most precious resource. And yes, they do live for right now, but they also live for years and decades from now. And instead of just spending time, they invest it with intention, on purpose. Let's dig deeper into the poor side first. Those of us who have lived some life have probably had periods of time, or maybe currently are in a period of time where this is relatable. But enough about us. It is way more fun to apply this to other people, in terms of the poor mindset side of the ledger, of course. I do it, you're probably going to do it, so let's do that. Consider someone in your life that is getting really poor investment outcomes. Just not advancing in any capacity or area, probably going backwards in many or most. The reason that time horizon is on the top of the list when we talk about when it comes to poor versus wealthy mindset is that I would bet a lot of money, and I don't bet, but if I did, I would bet a lot of money that that person that comes to mind who is getting terrible investment returns, probably going backward, that person almost certainly has a short-term focus in what they do in life and in how they approach investing in life. A short-term focus does not just have a strong influence on investment returns in the wrong direction. I believe it is often a prerequisite to getting bad outcomes in life and investing. It is a determinator of bad outcomes. Having that short-term focus, no view for longer than right now, or maybe just a few days from now. That friend or family member or acquaintance or colleague that comes to mind who's getting poor investment outcomes is probably getting poor investment outcomes across multiple areas of their life because of that short-term focus. Because if someone has a short-term mindset, they tend to apply it across the board in most areas of their life. And it is very hard to shift into a positive growth mode and into positive returns mode in anything with a short-term focus when that is the way that we approach life and investing. And a more extreme example that comes to mind for me related to this is from a few years ago, when I tried to help a guy who was living in an old camper van. He stopped by my church in the middle of the week when I was leaving a meeting. And he approached me in the parking lot asking for gas money. I don't recall if he was staying in the area or if he was on his way somewhere else, but it was the middle of winter, and where I'm from, that means snow and really cold. And this gentleman was clearly on the edge of being homeless, would be considered homeless by many standards. But he had his old camper van. We do try to help as many people as we can at our church. And instead of pointing him to our pastor, I told him that I won't give him gas money. Many of you know why. But I'm happy to follow him to the gas station and fill up his van. So we did that. And while we were filling up his van, he asked me for $8 so that he wouldn't freeze tonight. That's the way he phrased it. And of course, I wanted to dig into what he meant. Because $8 to keep someone from freezing? Tell me more. And he told me that he has a small propane heater in his van, and a 1-pound propane tank runs the heater on low for long enough during the night so that he stays warm enough. And a 1-pound single-use, non-refillable propane bottle costs about $8. And when I realized that this was what he was talking about, and that this is what he was using to heat his van at night, my math brain and problem-solving side started to kick in. And I did my best to get across to him that with a pretty cheap adapter for his heater and a $50 propane tank that holds 20 pounds of propane that can, by the way, be refilled for less than $20, he would have propane for the long term for less than $1 a pound instead of $8 a pound. That is $7 a day of potential savings, of real savings. That $7 a day for someone in that position is the difference between going to bed hungry and cold versus going to bed warm and fed. I even offered to go to the hardware store nearby and buy him that adapter, but he would not even consider it because a $20 propane tank costs a lot more today than a 1-pound can does. And he knew from experience that he could beg $8 from people. He might not be able to get $20 when he needed a refill. And you and I hear that, and we can very quickly do the math and realize that that $8 per night in the winter is about $240 a month, which is probably more than what most of us pay to heat our entire homes for a month in the winter. And if we had the opportunity to make a small investment to heat our homes for 1/8 the cost, $30 a month instead of $240 a month, we would rearrange our schedules to do it immediately. But the thought that this gentleman could think about investing well in anything with a focus that is 100% tuned to 24 hours or less is out of the question. There was no thought for outcomes beyond the next 12 or 24 hours, and therefore, there was no chance at proper resource allocation and long-term good decision-making. I'm sure this gentleman was dealing with all sorts of different struggles. His time horizon is not the only thing. But there is one common factor underlying this example and the examples of poor returns in life, and investing poorly that we can all identify. In other people, of course. These outcomes are always preceded by, and often caused by, a short-term focus. This is true in my experience and very likely true in yours as well. When we cannot look beyond what is right in front of us, we are locking ourselves into a short-term focus with almost guaranteed poor returns. Now, contrast that with the other side of the ledger, the wealthy mindset, the long-term focus, those who view time as the most precious resource. Yes, they care about what is right now. They do live for right now. That's where we live. But they also live for years and hopefully even decades from now, ideally decades from now. Instead of spending time, they invest time as their most precious resource. Now let's do that same exercise in reverse that we did on the other side. Think about someone you know who is getting the best investment returns across multiple areas of life. They are killing it. And since we had to think about someone else in the first example, I'm asking you to think about someone else in this example as well. You are still off the table. And these returns don't have to just be financial. They can be from an impact standpoint, relationships, health, what they are accomplishing, the impact that they're having in their community and on those around them. And I will bet you, again, if I was a betting man, I would nearly guarantee that they have a long-term focus. Because that is, again, a prerequisite. It underlies and interweaves those good long-term returns. The person who is clearly investing well, who is clearly getting great returns, and hopefully this is you, regardless of what area of life we're talking about, very likely has a long-term focus. And if you've noticed those returns, and you've seen the rewards that they are reaping, and the returns from the investments that they're getting, you can probably even see from the outside evidence of that long-term focus. Investments that they laid years ago, maybe decades ago, that are maturing, paying dividends, and still growing right now. This is why time horizon is so important, so foundational. It is very hard to get good investment returns with a short-term focus. It takes them off the table in most cases. And it is almost hard not to get good returns if you invest with some level of consistency with a long-term focus in mind. That is why time horizon is at the top of the list. And we can and do exist on a spectrum when it comes to time horizon. Some of us are excellent at managing our money with a long-term focus, but we are very bad at managing our health with a long-term focus. Some of us are great at focusing on our long-term relationship health, but then we have a very short-term, poor mindset when it comes to our spiritual health. And if all we do is align the areas that we care about more in line with a long-term focus of that wealthy mindset and change nothing else, we are probably going to start getting better outcomes. Time horizon is crucial, and probably the single biggest determining factor between poor outcomes and wealthy outcomes. Now let's talk about the second item on our list: scarcity versus abundance. The poor mindset assumes scarcity, of course. More people winning means less for you. They approach life as a zero-sum game. Resources are mostly fixed and limited, and I need to get what is mine. The wealthy mindset, in contrast, assumes abundance. More people winning is great. It is great for them and it is great for you. They approach life as a positive-sum game. More accurately, a positive-sum investment. Now let's dig into the scarcity mindset, the poor side of the ledger. Someone winning means you are losing. More for someone else means less for you. A zero-sum or negative-sum approach to both life and investing. With that scarcity mindset, good things aren't good things unless they're your good things. Other people's wins feel threatening or feel like a loss. If my neighbor gets a new car or gets a promotion, I feel worse by contrast because I didn't get that. Jealousy and cynicism abound on this side of the ledger. People with a scarcity mindset view the pie as fixed. Someone getting a piece means that piece isn't available for me. And this is an incredibly limiting and detrimental way to approach life. And when I describe it like that, very few of us are going to see ourselves in it. But this is a common mindset that we can and do fall into. And we have to be able to identify it and do what we can to move away from it. Now, a somewhat recent example of this comes to mind. I volunteer to coach 4th through 6th grade soccer for the school that my kids attend. The same school that we are heavily invested in. The same one that I teach my investment class at. And it has been great to coach all those kids over the years, including my own kids. And one of my favorite things about coaching is the human interactions and the very human responses from these little people. And one of the reasons why I love coaching is that a coach is in a very different position than a parent or a teacher. Coaches can say things matter-of-factly and give very direct feedback or direction that doesn't require patting them on the head, telling them what a great job they're doing. If they would just do this one thing a little better. No, not always necessary. As a coach, it's more often, hey, you can do that better. Go do that again. Or, don't ever do that again. And thankfully, often, good job, that's how it's done. And we had 2 teams one year at our grade school soccer level because we had such strong numbers, a lot of kids wanting to participate. A good problem to have, but that also meant that our team's strength was effectively cut in half. Great opportunity for development, didn't win many games. And at the tournament at the end of the season, my team had not done very well after the first 2 games. A loss and a tie. That was not a position that we were used to being in, considering that our single team had dominated the past couple years and won the tournament. And ahead of our 3rd and final game on that day, one of my young players said in front of the entire team, their teammates, my team, I don't care if we win this final game. I just want to have a better record than the other team, meaning our other team. And our other team had 2 losses at that point. So if we lost this next game, he was just really hoping that our sister team also lost their game as well, so that our result of loss, tie, loss would beat their result of 3 losses. And I did what a coach should do in that situation. And I told this player to not say stupid things, especially in front of the whole team. Then I pep talked my team as best I could ahead of that final game that we did, in fact, lose. But I share this as an example to point out a mindset that many of us have, not just as kids. Okay, I'm doing poorly. I'm okay being mediocre as long as other people are doing the same or worse, then I'm okay. And that is just a flat out wrong and terrible way of approaching life. There's a survey that I've heard discussed many times, but I've never read, which means that I can talk about it like I'm an expert in the subject, right? Essentially, my understanding of the survey is that it was done to determine what people would rather have when presented with two different options. The first is where everyone around you, in your neighborhood, that you're friends with, make a comparatively small amount of money, let's say $40,000 per year, but you make $80,000, a meaningful amount more. Or a situation where everyone around you makes a comparatively large amount of money, let's say $300,000 per year, and you make $150,000, comparatively much less. Now, on a raw dollar basis, that's pretty easy math. This survey assumed equal purchasing power, meaning that $80,000 really is twice as good as $40,000, and making $150,000 is about twice as good as making $80,000. But fully half of those surveyed chose option A. They would rather have half the purchasing power, half the lifestyle, as long as they were making double what those around them were making. And that has been identified in other areas. People would rather be less physically attractive overall as long as they are comparatively more attractive than those they interact with. Meaning, translating that, they would rather live in an uglier world, so to speak, as long as they were comparatively better. There are other examples that we could talk through, but, my friends, that is the scarcity mindset in action. And it is all around us. And that mindset, when practiced by enough people, results in a poorer and uglier world. And for the practitioner of that mindset, on an individual basis, it does result in a poorer and uglier world for them. Worse outcomes. But we don't have to be convinced of the fact that the scarcity mentality is bad. When we hear it, when you hear me describe it, we can see that and we can identify it. But we are drawn to it. We're drawn to it in so many different areas of life. It creeps in, that mindset. Oftentimes, it can be dictated by whether we like another person or not. We tend to have a much easier time celebrating the success of someone that we like. But when someone experiencing success is a person that we're not connected to, or especially when it's someone that we don't really like, we see that oftentimes as a bad thing. But that clearly is jealousy, and that is scarcity. And it's a very common mindset that we might not even know that we have unless we are looking for it and we identify it when it happens. And applying that mindset to areas of our lives is limiting to us. Because if we approach life from the standpoint of limited resources, fixed pie, then we are going to be much less likely to invest. We are going to be much less likely to, and this is important, realize the benefits of other people's success by proxy. If life is a zero-sum game, we have to hoard resources. We should only spend on ourselves, not invest in others. So then we will be less likely and less open to and miss opportunities to be invested in by others. People with a scarcity mindset approach life like it's a class with a teacher that's giving out a fixed number of A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. For instance, your classmate getting an A means that you're less likely to get an A. But we can see that as ridiculous. That is not how life works. And hopefully that's not how most classes work. Now, let's talk about the wealthy side of the equation. The abundance mentality. The mindset where more people winning means more value is being created. More for them, more for you, more for everyone. People with the abundance mindset that live on that wealthy side of the ledger believe that when more people win, whether it's me or you or someone we don't know, the pie actually gets bigger. And the opportunity for more pieces or bigger pieces grows. You winning and doing better means that the world gets better for not just you, but for those around you. The wealthy mindset of abundance is a positive sum approach to life, not a zero sum or negative sum. More value created by people makes the pie bigger. Other people's wins become a catalyst for your wins. Just like your wins benefit those who are close to you. You should be living a life where if you succeed, the people around you are better off. And because abundance is how the world works, when it is working correctly, often those around us are better off simply by proxy. They didn't even have to do anything. This happens to us all the time, and we should look for it and notice it. This incredible modern world that we live in is the biggest example of that. We are the beneficiaries of those who came before us and made the world better and made the pie bigger along the way. Let's talk about an example. Consider inventors or business leaders who succeed greatly. Actually, let's combine those two. And probably the most successful inventor, or at least one of the most successful inventors and business leaders of the past century, was Steve Jobs. He became a multi-billionaire and planted the seeds of what would become a multi-trillion-dollar company today, that is Apple, by inventing multiple breakthrough products. Yes, that made him rich. Yes, that made his company very large. But it also had a massive impact on the world. Just consider the iPhone, one of the products that he invented, or at least perfected at the time. Think about the benefit that you and I have personally gleaned from just the invention of that smartphone device. And now add that up over hundreds of millions of people who have owned those devices and will in the future. The benefit you have received, that we have received collectively, from this invention vastly outweighs any benefit he ever got from it personally. No single person got wealthier on the iPhone than Steve Jobs did, at least while he was alive. But society was impacted to a magnitude that is hard to calculate, probably in the hundreds or thousands of times greater than his specific benefit in monetary terms that he realized. Society realized more, probably thousands of times more, maybe even millions of times more. And if you approach life and investing with that abundance mentality, you are more likely to invest. You are more likely to be in situations and live life with other people who are looking to invest in themselves and invest in you. And this abundance mindset sometimes doesn't come naturally. It needs to be practiced. If you look at kids, there's a whole lot of scarcity going on. Mine, not fair, he got more than me. I don't want to share. That kid, I believe, is still inside of us. One of the most powerful things that we can do to practice abundance and chase away scarcity is the heck yeah approach. And this is what I mean. When you see someone succeed, get something that you don't have a good outcome, make yourself say, heck yeah, good for them. Even when you don't want to. Probably especially when you don't want to. If that thing or outcome was achieved by dishonest means, or they are just a straight up bad person, I'm not talking about that. But respond to other people's success the same way you would want them to respond to yours. And you will get better at it over time. Even if you don't believe it right away. Even if you don't believe the heck yeah that you're saying. It will start to shift your perspective and shift your mindset toward the abundance mindset. And it will result in better outcomes for you over time. So yeah, ultimately, I guess it's about being selfish. But truly, we shouldn't just be doing it for ourselves. Shifting toward an abundance mindset opens up the opportunity to invest better in yourself and in others. Seeing the pie as fixed results in a protectionist approach to life and a viewpoint of shrinking investment accounts. Seeing the pie as growable results in seeing more of the opportunities around you and then having the willingness to invest in them. All right, and finally, for today, let's cover ownership. Number 3 on the wealthy versus poor ledger. And on the poor side of the equation, ownership is abdicated, given up, rejected, or avoided. The poor mindset doesn't invest because they reject ownership. Not just of things, but of responsibility. Those with a poor mindset avoid addressing problems, and they're unwilling to admit mistakes. They outsource responsibility and they blame others. On the wealthy side, ownership is owned. It is embraced. Owned is the operative word here, isn't it? They put their money to work in things that appreciate and value. They invest their limited resources of time, energy, and money in the areas that they have ownership in and that they want to build and grow. And it's not just with things, it's with responsibility. They address known problems. They bring solutions and are willing to help. They admit mistakes and they own outcomes, both good and bad. And they want to grow from them. And as we dig into the poor side of the ledger related to ownership, it should not be hard to see how this mindset is limiting and detrimental to our current and future returns. Because if ownership is rejected, if you don't own anything that can compound and grow, you don't have anything that can produce returns. In order to invest, you have to have ownership in something. Removing ownership removes any possibility for future returns and for future growth. Ownership matters. Something you'll hear me reference in the future is the renter versus owner mentality. I think this fits well here as we look at the poor versus wealthy mindset related to ownership. There are places where you can drive through, let's say drive through a neighborhood, and probably guess which houses are being rented versus owned based on how things are cared for, what the yard looks like, their landscaping, their blinds, their patio furniture. And I don't believe this is just because an owner might have more money or more wealth, but it's because an owner has ownership. Renters are less likely to address issues, beautify the house and property, make connections with their neighbors. We've all heard the phrase, no one's ever taken a rental car through the car wash. I'm sure someone has, but yeah, it's unlikely. And don't hear me say that renters are worse people than owners. I have been a renter in the past. And my neighbors were just less interested in connection compared to where I've owned my home. This is built into human nature. And if you know that your job is short term and you may move elsewhere in the next couple of years, or especially in the next couple months, you're probably going to be renting, and you're probably not going to be putting down roots in that community because you know that it's not going to last. And that doesn't make somebody a bad person. It just is a reflection on being a renter versus being an owner. Ownership is not just a legal state of possession and rights. It is a powerful driver of our mindset and our behavior. And because of that, it is a powerful driver of our returns. And this applies to all areas of life. If someone does not take ownership of the investments that they are making and the returns that are being produced from those investments, there is very little hope for strong returns in the future. We can all think about people who reject ownership in life, not just from a money standpoint, but from a life investing standpoint. Nothing is ever their fault. Everything is always someone else's fault. These people may want to take credit for wins when they happen, but nobody believes them because they don't take ownership, responsibility of the other side of it. And those who don't take ownership are usually not investing in anything because they rarely have anything of value that they can own in order to invest. People who are given things without making an investment themselves don't care as much about it. They may still care to some extent, but not nearly as much as if they worked for it, if they sacrificed for it. The car that is just given to the teenager versus the car that is saved and worked for. There will often be a difference in how that car is cared for and valued. Now, on the other side, the wealthy side of the ledger, the operative word here, of course, is owned. Those with a wealthy mindset when it comes to ownership intentionally invest their resources to build and grow the things that they care about. People with a wealthy mindset address known problems, and they have solutions for problems and are willing to help, and they admit mistakes. They build and improve things for the future. They own outcomes both good and bad, and they want to grow from them. Because they are invested, because they are owners, and because of that, they care more. And a great truth is that, in many cases, you don't even have to have physical, legal ownership of something to act as an owner. Someone with an ownership mentality in their business, their school, their church, their community, they would look for ways to act as an owner because they care, because they want to see it grow, because they want to invest. They'll see an issue, a piece of trash, something broken, an opportunity to serve, and they will do what they can to solve that need. They wouldn't think to leave a problem for someone else to address if they have the means to address it themselves. Their ownership mentality results in an attitude and therefore behavior that is bent toward the betterment of the places that they care about. And the powerful thing that this illustrates is that physical, legal, actual ownership is not the part that is most important. It is the mindset. Approaching these things with an ownership mentality, acting as an owner, is what results in the benefits, the returns. Ultimately, because the investment is being made. And people with an ownership mentality are making investments and likely generating positive returns in many areas of life. When we own something, we want to invest our resources in it because we want to see it grow. We want to see it succeed. Invested equals valued. Earned equals enjoyed. We will have a future episode dedicated to diving into this concept specifically, but I'll give you a brief overview here. Most people believe that we invest in what we care about. That because we care about and value something, that's why we invest in it. And that's true, but I believe that that is the weaker direction of the cause and effect relationship there. I believe what is more often true and more powerful is the other direction. We care about what we invest in. And the more we invest in it, the more we will care about it and therefore value it. And if you wait to invest in something you know is important or you know you should care about because you don't care enough about it yet, you may never make that investment. Start investing in it, even a small amount, and it will become more valuable to you as a result. You will care more. It is an incredibly powerful relationship, and it works most powerfully in the opposite way that we think it does. We don't just invest in what we care about, we care about what we invest in. There's a lot to dig into and unpack in that, and we will do that in the future. When you have an ownership mentality in your job, whether you own a piece of the company or not, you'll be producing returns that are going to be noticed. And if they're never noticed, you're going to have no problem transferring that ownership mentality to another company who will notice it. If you have an ownership mentality in your relationships, you will be investing, not waiting for someone else to invest, or not waiting until you care to invest. You already care. You're an owner. If you have an ownership mentality with your health, you're going to see the inputs of food and your outputs of energy as investments. And the more you invest in it, the more you will care. And this should be pretty obvious, but I need to state it plainly and to make sure that we're on the same page. You don't get returns from other people owning things. You get returns from you owning it. Yes, I talked earlier about benefits by proxy, but I'm talking about real, fundamental, assigned ownership returns. Returns that you can claim. And that has to go both ways. In order to capture the upside, you also have to capture the downside sometimes. But owning it means that you're going to learn from it and make adjustments, retool or redirect resources. I have to do this often as a portfolio manager. And the upside, as long as the trajectory is pointed in the right direction, is much, much higher than the downside. Owning is worth it. If you are investing on purpose toward outcomes that you're trying to get, and this may be able to go without being said, but I'm going to say it anyway, ownership is the single biggest prerequisite to getting returns in the first place. You can identify the best investments. You can be exactly right about what companies are going to shoot up over the next 12, 24, 36 months, or even better, over the decades. But if you don't actually own them, it didn't matter that you were right. It didn't matter that you identified those investments. It almost makes it worse that you identified them if you didn't put money to work, if you didn't actually own them, than if you had not identified them in the first place. Ownership is key in money and in life. All right, we set the stage today for going deeper into the wealthy versus poor mindset. I hope that we were able to get beyond just simple manifestation and positive vibes. And importantly, we talked about the first three wealthy mindset versus poor mindset contrasts, our time horizon, scarcity versus abundance, and how we approach ownership, whether we have it or whether we don't. And what I hope is clear at this point, when it comes to the returns that we are trying to get, those three things are by far the most determinative of the direction that we're going to go with our investments. In every area that we invest in, money, relationships, health, career, all of it. To illustrate that point, consider financial investing. Input a short time horizon, a scarcity mentality, and no ownership. That removes returns from the equation. Or the only returns that are available are the negative ones. Contrast that with a long time horizon, an abundance mentality, and full ownership. That is where returns exist. That is why these are the prerequisites, the ingredients that are needed to set the stage and to make it possible to achieve any positive return at all. And those returns can and will go very high into the future if we are investing in meaningful things with our investment approach tuned to the wealthy side of the ledger. And if we can do this and apply it to life, those returns are there to be captured. Our time horizon, whether we approach life and investing from a scarcity versus abundance mindset, and whether or not we take ownership in those areas are going to determine whether we are on a negative trajectory or a positive trajectory, and whether returns are even available to us or not. This is why the first three items on our wealthy versus poor ledger are fundamental. We went through 3 of the 16 today, but don't worry, we will cover the rest in the next 2 episodes. In the next episode, we are going to knock through a lot more of these parallels on that wealthy versus poor ledger. We will get right into it, and we will start with purpose. And until then, I want to say thank you for investing in yourself and in those around you. I will talk to you next time. Imagine a world where the pies are constantly getting bigger. Who doesn't want more pie? That is the world we live in.